The gunshot that killed her husband echoed in Sarah McKenzie's mind every night, though it had been 8 months since she watched him bleed out on the dusty streets of Abilene, Kansas. And the sound never faded, never gave her peace, never let her forget that she had been powerless to save him. It was May 1878, and Sarah stood behind the bar of the Silver Star Saloon, wiping down glasses with mechanical precision while the afternoon sun slanted through the grimy windows. She had moved to the small town of Red Creek, Texas, 3 months ago, trying to escape the memories that haunted her in Kansas. The saloon owner, a gruff but kind woman named Martha Collins, had taken one look at Sarah's hollow eyes and given her a job without asking too many questions. Sarah was grateful for that, grateful for work that kept her hands busy and her mind occupied, even if it could not fill the gaping wound in her chest where her heart used to be. The saloon was quiet at this hour, just a few ranch hands playing cards in the corner and old Pete snoring at his usual table. Sarah liked the quiet times. They demanded less of her, less smiling, less pretending that she was anything other than a shell of the woman she used to be. She had been 23 when James died, shot down by a drifter over a perceived insult that meant nothing. Now, at 24, she felt ancient, worn down by grief and rage and a bone-deep weariness that no amount of sleep could cure. The door swung open, bringing with it a gust of hot Texas wind and a man Sarah had never seen before. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscled build of someone who worked hard for his living. His hat was pulled low, but she could see dark hair curling at his collar and a few days' worth of stubble on his strong jaw. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, his boots making soft thuds on the wooden floor as he approached the bar. "Whiskey?" he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in Sarah's chest. He pulled off his hat, revealing deep brown eyes that crinkled at the corners and a face that was handsome in a rough, weathered way. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30 at most, with the kind of face that had seen its share of trouble but had not been hardened by it. Sarah poured the whiskey without speaking, setting the glass in front of him with a soft clink. She had perfected the art of serving drinks without encouraging conversation, keeping her eyes down and her expression neutral. Most men took the hint. This one, however, did not seem to notice or care about her deliberate coldness. "Name's Caleb Stone," he said, taking a sip of his whiskey and nodding in appreciation. "Just rode in from Colorado. Heard there might be work around these parts for a man who knows his way around horses and cattle." Sarah wiped down the already clean section of bar in front of her, not meeting his eyes. "You would have to ask at the ranches. The Patterson spread is always looking for hands about 5 miles north of town." "Obliged," Caleb said, but he made no move to leave. Instead, he studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. "What's your name?" "Sarah," she said shortly, turning away to arrange bottles that did not need arranging. "Pretty name for a pretty lady," Caleb said, and there was something in his tone that was not the usual crude flattery she heard from drunken cowboys. It sounded genuine, almost gentle, and that made her angry in a way she could not quite explain. "Save your charm for someone who wants it," Sarah said, her voice sharper than she intended. "I am just here to pour drinks, nothing more." Instead of being offended, Caleb simply nodded, taking another sip of his whiskey. "Fair enough. No harm in a friendly conversation, though, is there?" Sarah wanted to tell him that yes, there was harm, that every conversation was a risk, every connection a potential wound waiting to happen. But she bit her tongue and said nothing, hoping he would finish his drink and leave. To her annoyance, he seemed in no hurry, sipping slowly and watching the card game in the corner with mild interest. Martha emerged from the back room, her gray hair pinned in its usual no-nonsense bun, her sharp eyes taking in the new customer with practiced assessment. "You the fellow asking about work at the Patterson place?" Caleb turned to her with a respectful nod. "Yes, ma'am. Caleb Stone. I have 10 years' experience with horses and cattle, can break and train, and I am handy with repairs and building when needed. Martha looked him up and down, her expression thoughtful. Patterson is a good man to work for, pays fair and does not cheat his hands. But if you are looking for something more permanent, my nephew runs a ranch about 15 miles west. Lost his foreman last month when the man decided to try his luck in the California goldfields. It is hard work, but the pay is better than most outfits, and there is a bunkhouse for the hands. Sounds promising, Caleb said. I appreciate the information. Come back tomorrow evening, Martha said. I will have my nephew stop by and you can talk to him then. Name is Tom Collins and he is a straight shooter. I will do that, Caleb said, finishing his whiskey and setting coins on the bar. His eyes found Sarah again, and she felt that uncomfortable awareness flare once more. Thank you for the drink, Sarah, and for the directions. She nodded curtly, not trusting herself to speak, and watched as he settled his hat back on his head and walked out into the bright afternoon. When the door closed behind him, Martha came to stand beside her, arms crossed over her ample chest. That is a good man, Martha said quietly. I can always tell. You could do worse than to smile at him once in a while. I am not looking, Sarah said flatly. I know, Martha said, her voice softening. But maybe someday you will be ready to live again instead of just existing. When that day comes, I hope you remember that not all men are like the one who took your husband from you. Sarah said nothing, just picked up another glass to clean, her throat tight with unshed tears. She knew Martha meant well, but the older woman could not understand. No one could understand the way Sarah's whole world had shattered in those terrible moments when James fell. The way his blood had pooled on the ground while she screamed for help that came too late. She had loved him with everything she had, and when he died, that capacity for love had died with him. She was hollow now, empty, and no amount of kind words or handsome strangers could change that fundamental truth. The rest of the day passed in its usual rhythm. The saloon grew busier as evening approached, filling with ranch hands and townspeople looking to wash away the day's dust with whiskey and beer. Sarah moved through it all with practiced efficiency, pouring drinks and deflecting unwanted advances with cold silence, and when necessary, the daringer Martha kept behind the bar. She had never had to use it, but the threat was usually enough to make even the drunkest cowboy think twice. It was nearly midnight when the saloon finally emptied out, and Sarah helped Martha clean up, sweeping the floor and washing glasses in the bucket of water they kept for that purpose. Her body ached with exhaustion, but it was a good ache, the kind that promised dreamless sleep if she was lucky. Get on home, Martha said, shooing her toward the door. You look dead on your feet. Sarah did not argue, just grabbed her shawl and stepped out into the cool night air. Red Creek was a small town, barely more than a wide main street with a scattering of buildings and houses spreading out from it. Sarah rented a tiny room above the general store, just big enough for a bed and a washstand, but it was hers, and that was what mattered. She walked quickly, her hand on the small knife she kept in her pocket, always aware that a woman alone at night was vulnerable in ways that men never had to think about. She was halfway to her room when she heard the sound of raised voices coming from the alley beside the livery stable. Sarah knew she should keep walking, mind her own business, but something in the tone of those voices made her pause. There was fear there and pain, and she found herself moving toward the alley before she could think better of it. In the dim light from the moon, she could see 3 men surrounding a 4th figure on the ground. The men were laughing, their voices cruel, and Sarah recognized them as some of the rougher elements that drifted through town. The figure on the ground was trying to curl into a protective ball while kicks and blows rained down. "Hey," Sarah shouted, her voice ringing out sharp and clear in the night air. "Leave him alone." The men turned to look at her, their faces twisted with drink and meanness. "This is not your concern, lady," one of them said, his words slurred. "Go on home before you get hurt." Sarah's hand closed around the knife in her pocket and she pulled it out, holding it steady despite the way her heart hammered in her chest. I said leave him alone. Now. The men looked at each other, seemed to weigh their options, and then apparently decided that a woman with a knife was more trouble than they wanted. They spat on the ground and ambled off into the darkness, their laughter echoing behind them. Sarah waited until they were gone, then approached the figure on the ground cautiously. It was not a man at all, but a boy, maybe 16 or 17, with dark skin and clothing that marked him as one of the freed slaves who had settled in the area after the war. His face was bloody and he was clutching his ribs with one arm, his breathing shallow and pained. "Can you stand?" Sarah asked, kneeling beside him. The boy nodded, though the movement clearly cost him. Sarah helped him to his feet, supporting his weight as best she could. He was tall and gangly, all arms and legs, and she could feel him trembling with shock and pain. "Where do you live?" she asked. "Edge of town," he managed to say through split lips. "By the creek." Sarah knew the area he meant, a collection of small homes where some of the black families had built their community. It was too far for him to walk in his condition. She looked around, trying to decide what to do, and then she heard the sound of boots on the wooden sidewalk. Caleb Stone emerged from the shadows, his face tight with concern. "I heard shouting. Is everything all right?" For once, Sarah was grateful to see him. "This boy needs a doctor. Can you help me get him to Doc Morrison's place?" Caleb did not hesitate, just moved to the boy's other side and took most of his weight with easy strength. Together, they half-walked, half-carried him down the street to the small house where the town's doctor lived and worked. Doc Morrison, a cranky old man with skilled hands and a good heart, answered the door in his nightshirt and immediately ushered them inside. While the doctor examined the boy, Sarah and Caleb waited in the small front room, the silence between them awkward and charged. Sarah kept her eyes on her hands, aware of Caleb watching her with that same intense focus he had shown at the bar. "That was brave," Caleb said finally, "but foolish. Those men could have hurt you." "They were going to kill that boy," Sarah said flatly. "I could not just walk past." "No," Caleb agreed. "I suppose you could not. You are not the kind of woman who looks away from trouble." Sarah did not know how to respond to that, so she said nothing. After a few minutes, Doc Morrison emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Couple of cracked ribs, lots of bruising, and that lip is going to need stitches," he said. "But he will be fine. Says his name is Isaac Freeman, lives with his grandmother out by the creek. One of you want to go let her know where he is?" "I will go," Caleb said immediately. "Miss Sarah has had enough excitement for one night. I will walk her home first, then go find the grandmother." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to say she could take care of herself, but exhaustion suddenly crashed over her like a wave. She nodded mutely, and Caleb took her elbow with gentle courtesy, guiding her out into the night. They walked in silence to the general store, and Sarah was acutely aware of the warmth of his hand on her arm, the solid presence of him beside her. When they reached the external stairs that led up to her room, she pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. "Thank you," she said stiffly, "for helping with Isaac." "You are the one who helped him," Caleb said. "I just carried him. You put yourself in danger for a stranger." "That takes a special kind of courage," Sarah shook her head. "It was not courage, it was just the right thing to do." Caleb studied her in the moonlight, and Sarah had the unsettling feeling that he could see right through her carefully constructed walls. "You have seen trouble," he said softly. "More than your share, I think. It is in your eyes, the way you hold yourself like you are waiting for the next blow to fall." "You do not know anything about me," Sarah said, her voice sharp with sudden anger. "Do not pretend that you do." "You are right," Caleb said, holding up his hands in a peaceable gesture. "I apologize. I just meant that if you ever want to talk, I am a good listener. No expectations, no pressure, just a friendly ear." "I do not need a friend," Sarah said, and the words came out colder than she intended. "I do not need anything from you or anyone else. I am fine on my own." Something flickered in Caleb's eyes, something that might have been understanding or pity, and Sarah hated it, hated that he looked at her like she was something broken and wounded. Because she was broken, she knew that, but she did not want to see that knowledge reflected back at her. "Good night, Miss Sarah," Caleb said quietly, and then he turned and walked away into the darkness, leaving her alone on the stairs. Sarah climbed up to her room, her hands shaking as she unlocked the door. Once inside, she lit the lamp with trembling fingers and sat down on the edge of her narrow bed, her whole body suddenly weak. She did not cry. She had not cried since the day they buried James, as if all her tears had been used up in that first terrible wave of grief. But she sat there in the lamplight, staring at the rough wooden walls, and felt the weight of her loneliness pressing down on her like a physical thing. She thought about Caleb's words, about the concern in his eyes and something twisted in her chest. She did not want his concern or his kindness. Kindness was dangerous. It made you soft, made you vulnerable, made you believe that maybe, just maybe, you could be happy again. And Sarah knew better than to believe in happiness. She had been happy once, and it had been torn away from her in a spray of blood and gunpowder. She would not make that mistake again. The next morning, Sarah woke with gritty eyes and an aching head. She dressed mechanically and went downstairs to help in the general store for a few hours, as she often did to earn a bit of extra money. The store owner, Mr. Chen, was a Chinese immigrant who had survived the railroad work and the violence that came with it to build a successful business. He was a quiet man who respected Sarah's need for silence, and they worked side by side restocking shelves and serving customers without much conversation. It was mid-morning when Isaac Freeman limped into the store, his face swollen and bruised but his eyes bright with determination. He made his way straight to Sarah, who was counting out nails for a customer. "Miss Sarah," he said, his voice earnest despite the obvious pain it caused him to talk. "I wanted to thank you proper for what you did last night. My grandmother wanted me to bring you this." He held out a small cloth bundle, his hands trembling slightly. Sarah took the bundle and unwrapped it to find a loaf of fresh bread, still warm, and a jar of honey. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. "You did not have to do this," she said softly. "Yes, we did," Isaac said firmly. "You saved my life. Those men would have kept kicking until I stopped moving. Grandmother says you have a good heart, and she is never wrong about people." Sarah did not feel like she had a good heart. She felt like she had no heart at all, just a cold, empty space where one used to be. But she managed a small smile for the boy's sake. "How are you feeling?" "Sore," Isaac admitted with a crooked grin that made him wince. "But I will live, thanks to you. Doc Morrison says I need to rest for a few days, but then I can get back to work at the livery." "Those men," Sarah said carefully. "Do you know why they attacked you?" Isaac's expression darkened. "They did not need a reason except the color of my skin. It is the way of things sometimes, Miss Sarah. Most folks around here are decent enough, but there are always some who carry hate in their hearts." He shrugged, a gesture of weary acceptance that made Sarah angry on his behalf. "It is not right," she said fiercely. "No, it is not," Isaac agreed, "but it is the world we live in. All we can do is keep our heads down and try to survive." He paused, then added, "That cowboy who helped last night, Mr. Stone, he went and found my grandmother like he promised. Walked her all the way to the doc's place in the middle of the night and waited until she was satisfied I would be all right. He is a good man." Sarah felt a pang of something she did not want to examine too closely. "Yes," she said quietly, "I suppose he is." Isaac left soon after, and Sarah tucked the bread and honey away, touched by the gesture despite herself. The rest of the day passed quickly, and before she knew it, it was time to head to the Silver Star for her evening shift. The saloon was already fairly busy when she arrived, and Martha was behind the bar pulling beers with practiced efficiency. "Your cowboy came by earlier," Martha said with a knowing look. "Talked to Tom about the foreman job. Tom hired him on the spot. Seems Caleb knows his business when it comes to horses." "He is not my cowboy," Sarah said automatically, tying her apron around her waist. "If you say so," Martha said, clearly not believing her. "He is starting tomorrow, but he said he would stop by tonight to celebrate." "Try to be civil, would you?" Tom likes him, and I like Tom, so by extension I like Caleb. Sarah rolled her eyes but did not argue. She took up her position behind the bar and began serving the steady stream of customers, letting the familiar routine soothe her frayed nerves. She was pouring whiskey for one of the ranch hands when Caleb walked in, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt that did nothing to hide his broad shoulders and muscled arms. He caught her eye and smiled, a warm, genuine smile that did something strange to Sarah's insides. She looked away quickly, focusing on the drink in front of her with unnecessary intensity. Caleb made his way to the bar, settling onto a stool with easy grace. "Evening, Sarah, Martha. I hear congratulations are in order for me." "Tom says you know your way around a ranch," Martha said, leaning against the bar with her arms crossed. "He is a good judge of character, so I trust his judgment, but if you prove him wrong, you will answer to me." "Clear, Crystal," Caleb said, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "I would not dream of crossing you, ma'am," Martha laughed, a deep, booming sound. "Smart man. Sarah, pour this man a drink on the house. It is not every day we get a new foreman in the family business." Sarah poured the whiskey, sliding it across the bar to Caleb without meeting his eyes. He caught her wrist gently before she could pull away, his touch warm and calloused against her skin. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For last night, not many people would have done what you did." Sarah tugged her hand free, her skin tingling where he had touched her. "I told you it was just the right thing to do." "Maybe," Caleb said, his eyes searching her face. "But right does not always mean easy or safe. You could have been hurt." "But I was not," Sarah said, her voice sharper than she intended. "And neither was Isaac, so everything worked out fine." Caleb took a sip of his whiskey, still watching her with that unsettling intensity. "You are a hard woman to get to know, Sarah McKenzie." Sarah froze, her whole body going rigid. "How do you know my full name?" "Martha mentioned it," Caleb said, his expression confused by her reaction. "Is that a problem?" Sarah forced herself to breathe to relax her clenched muscles. "No," she said, though her voice sounded strained even to her own ears. "No problem," but hearing her married name spoken aloud felt like a punch to the gut. She had been trying so hard to leave that part of her life behind, to forget the pain and the loss, and the woman she used to be when James was alive. Hearing her name, her real name, dragged it all back to the surface, and suddenly she could not breathe, could not think, could not do anything except stand there and feel the panic rising in her throat. "Sarah," Caleb's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you all right?" She was not all right. She was drowning, suffocating under the weight of memories she had tried so hard to bury. Without a word, she turned and fled to the back room, ignoring Martha's concerned call and the curious looks from the customers. She leaned against the wall, her hands pressed to her chest, trying to force air into her lungs. The door opened behind her, and she knew without looking that it was Caleb. She wanted to tell him to leave, to go away and leave her alone with her grief, but the words would not come. "Sarah," Caleb said gently, not touching her but standing close enough that she could feel his presence like a warm anchor in the storm of her panic. "Talk to me. What is happening?" "I cannot do this," Sarah gasped, the words ripping out of her like broken glass. "I cannot pretend to be normal, cannot smile and make small talk and act like everything is fine when my whole world ended 8 months ago." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "Who did you lose?" "My husband," Sarah said, and saying it out loud made it real all over again, made the wound fresh and bleeding. "His name was James. We had been married for 3 years. He was kind and gentle and good, and he died because some drunk drifter thought he had been insulted. One bullet and he was gone, and there was nothing I could do except watch him die in my arms." The tears came then, finally, great wrenching sobs that tore through her like a physical force. She slid down the wall, her knees giving out, and Caleb was there, catching her, holding her with strong, steady arms while she fell apart. She cried for James, for the life they had planned together, for the children they would never have, for the future that had been stolen from them. She cried for herself, for the woman she used to be who believed in love and happiness and forever. Caleb did not say anything, just held her and let her cry, one hand stroking her hair with infinite gentleness. When the storm finally passed, Sarah found herself exhausted and hollow, drained of everything. She pulled back, wiping at her face with shaking hands, unable to meet Caleb's eyes. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I should not have done that." "You have nothing to be sorry for," Caleb said, his voice rough with emotion. "Grief is not something you can schedule or control. It comes when it comes, and all you can do is survive it." Sarah finally looked at him and was surprised to see understanding in his eyes, a deep, bone-level knowledge that spoke of his own experience with loss. "You have lost someone too," she said, and it was not a question. Caleb nodded slowly. "My younger brother, Daniel. He was 18, just a kid really. We were working a ranch up in Wyoming 5 years ago when there was an accident. A horse spooked and kicked him in the head. He died 3 days later without ever waking up." His voice was steady, but Sarah could see the old pain in his eyes. "I blamed myself for a long time. I was supposed to be watching him, teaching him, keeping him safe, and I failed." "It was not your fault," Sarah said automatically. "I know that now," Caleb said. "It took a long time and a lot of dark nights, but I finally accepted that sometimes terrible things happen, and there is no one to blame. It does not make it hurt less, but it makes it possible to keep living." He paused, his eyes searching her face. "You have been running from your grief, Sarah. Trying to outrun the pain by moving to a new town, by keeping everyone at arm's length, by refusing to let yourself feel anything. But grief does not work that way. It follows you wherever you go until you stop and face it." "I do not know how to face it," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is too big, too overwhelming. If I let myself really feel it, I am afraid it will destroy me." "It will not destroy you," Caleb said firmly. "You are stronger than you think, Sarah McKenzie. You survived the worst thing that could happen to you, and you are still here, still fighting, still putting yourself in danger to help a boy you do not even know. That is not weakness. That is incredible strength." Sarah wanted to believe him, wanted to think that she was strong instead of just stubborn, that she was surviving instead of merely existing. But the weight of her grief was still there, still pressing down on her, still making it hard to breathe. "I told James I was too broken for him when we first met," Sarah said, the words coming slow and halting. "I had lost my parents to cholera the year before, and I did not think I would ever be whole again. And he said that was all right because he specialized in mending broken things." She smiled through fresh tears, remembering. "He was a carpenter, you see. He built beautiful furniture, things that would last for generations. And he was so patient with me, so gentle, until I finally believed that maybe I could be whole again. And I was, for 3 wonderful years. But now he is gone, and I am more broken than ever, and there is no one left to mend me." Caleb was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was soft but certain. "I am too broken for any man," she whispered low. "The cowboy said lucky I specialize in mending." Sarah looked at him, her breath catching in her throat. "What? That is what you need to hear, is it not?" Caleb said, his eyes locked on hers. "That you are not so broken that you cannot be mended, that there is someone who sees your pain and is not scared away by it. That you do not have to carry this alone anymore." "You do not even know me," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Then let me," Caleb said simply. "Let me know you, let me be your friend if nothing else. Let me help you carry this burden for a while until you are strong enough to carry it on your own." Sarah wanted to say no, wanted to push him away and retreat back into the safety of her isolation. But she was so tired of being alone, so tired of pretending that she did not need anyone. And there was something in Caleb's eyes, a sincerity and warmth that called to the parts of her that had been frozen for so long. "I do not know if I can do this," she said honestly. "I do not know if I have anything left to give." "I am not asking you to give me anything," Caleb said. "I am just asking you to let me stand beside you, that is all. No expectations, no pressure, just companionship." Sarah took a deep, shaky breath and nodded. "All right," she whispered, "but I cannot promise it will be easy." I cannot promise I will not push you away or hurt you with my anger and my grief. I am a cowboy, Caleb said with a crooked smile. We are used to getting kicked. I think I can handle it. Despite everything, Sarah felt a small laugh bubble up in her chest. It felt strange, foreign, but not entirely unwelcome. You are persistent, I will give you that. One of my many charms, Caleb said, standing and offering her his hand. Now come on. Martha is probably worried sick, and if we stay back here much longer, the whole saloon is going to start gossiping. Sarah took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, and she knew she must look a mess. But somehow that did not seem to matter as much as it should. She splashed some water on her face from the basin in the corner and straightened her apron, taking a moment to compose herself before following Caleb back out into the main room. Martha took one look at her and bustled over, pulling Sarah into a fierce hug. You all right, honey? I am getting there, Sarah said, and for the first time in months it felt like the truth. The next few weeks passed in a strange, suspended way. Sarah continued her work at the saloon and the general store, but she found herself increasingly aware of Caleb's presence in her life. He stopped by the Silver Star most evenings after finishing his work at the Collins Ranch, always sitting at the bar and nursing a single whiskey while he talked to Martha or played cards with the other ranch hands. He never pushed Sarah for conversation, never demanded her attention, but he was there, a steady, reliable presence that she found herself growing to depend on. Sometimes he would tell her stories about his day, about the horses he was training or the repairs he was making to the ranch. His voice was soothing, his manner easy, and Sarah found herself listening despite her best intentions to remain aloof. Other times he would simply sit in comfortable silence, seeming to understand that she needed quiet more than words. Slowly, carefully, Sarah felt the frozen places inside her beginning to thaw. It was painful, like blood returning to numb limbs, but it was also strangely liberating. She found herself smiling more, laughing occasionally at Caleb's dry humor, even contributing to conversations instead of just listening from the sidelines. One evening in late June, Caleb arrived at the saloon with a purpose in his stride. I have a proposition for you, he said, leaning against the bar with a smile that made Sarah's heart skip in a way she was not quite ready to examine. What kind of proposition? Sarah asked warily. Tom is having a barn raising this Sunday, Caleb explained. The old barn collapsed during that storm last week, and he needs a new one before the hay harvest. The whole community is invited, and there will be food and music and dancing afterward. I thought you might like to come. As my friend, he added quickly, seeing the panic flash across her face. Sarah's instinct was to refuse, to retreat back into her safe isolation. But she thought about what Caleb had said about facing her grief instead of running from it, and she forced herself to consider the invitation seriously. It had been months since she had done anything social, months since she had allowed herself to be part of a community. Maybe it was time to try. All right, she said slowly, but I am not dancing. Fair enough, Caleb said, his smile widening. I will pick you up at 8 o'clock Sunday morning. Wear something you do not mind getting dusty. Sunday dawned clear and hot, the Texas sun already beating down mercilessly by the time Caleb arrived with a wagon borrowed from the ranch. Sarah had dressed in an old work dress and boots, her hair pulled back in a simple braid, and she carried a basket with a pie she had made the night before. It was apple, James's favorite, and she had cried while making it, but she had also felt closer to his memory than she had in months. The ride to the Collins Ranch took about an hour, and Sarah spent most of it watching the landscape roll past. The land here was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, all golden grass and blue sky stretching out to the horizon. It reminded her of Kansas, of the life she had left behind, but the pain that memory brought was duller now, more bearable. You are quiet, Caleb observed, guiding the horses with easy competence. Just thinking, Sarah said. About the past, mostly. It does not hurt quite as much as it used to. That is good, Caleb said. That is progress. When they arrived at the ranch, Sarah was surprised to see dozens of people already gathered, wagons and horses scattered across the yard. Men were organizing lumber and tools, while women were setting up tables loaded with food. Children ran everywhere, their laughter bright and carefree in the morning air. Martha spotted them immediately and waved them over. There you are. Sarah, I am so glad you came. Come help me set up the food tables. Caleb, Tom is looking for you, something about the support beams. Caleb shot Sarah an apologetic look and headed off toward a group of men examining a stack of timber. Sarah followed Martha to the food tables, trying to ignore the curious looks from the other women. She knew what they were thinking, knew that a young widow showing up with a handsome cowboy was bound to cause gossip. But she held her head high and focused on arranging dishes and plates, letting Martha's cheerful chatter wash over her. The barn raising was fascinating to watch. The men worked with coordinated precision, hauling timber and hammering nails, their voices calling out measurements and instructions. Sarah found herself watching Caleb, admiring the way he moved with such strength and confidence, his shirt clinging to his back with sweat as the day grew hotter. There was something almost mesmerizing about the sight, and she felt a flutter of something in her chest that she had thought long dead. By mid-afternoon, the frame of the barn was up, and the men took a break for food and water. Sarah helped serve, filling plates and making sure everyone had enough to eat. Isaac Freeman was there with his grandmother, and he grinned at Sarah when he saw her, his bruises faded to yellow shadows. "Miss Sarah, I did not expect to see you here." "Caleb invited me," Sarah said, ladling stew onto his plate. "How have you been?" "Good," Isaac said. "Working at the livery again. Mr. Pearson says I have a gift with horses." He looked proud, and Sarah felt a surge of warmth for this resilient young man. As the sun began to set, lanterns were lit and music started up. Someone had brought a fiddle, and soon the air was filled with lively tunes that made Sarah's feet tap despite herself. Caleb found her standing at the edge of the gathering, watching the dancers with a wistful expression. "Change your mind about dancing?" he asked, offering her his hand. Sarah shook her head. "I told you I am not dancing." "Then walk with me," Caleb said. "It is too beautiful an evening to spend it standing still." Sarah hesitated, then took his hand. They walked away from the noise and light, following a path that led down to a small creek that ran through the property. The sound of the water was soothing, and the air was cooler here, fragrant with wild sage and grass. "Thank you for bringing me today," Sarah said quietly. "I have not felt this normal in a long time." "You do not have to thank me," Caleb said. "I am just glad you came. You looked like you were having a good time." "I was," Sarah admitted. "It felt good to be part of something again, to be surrounded by people instead of isolated in my grief." They sat down on a fallen log by the creek, and Caleb picked up a smooth stone, turning it over in his hands. "I have been thinking a lot about what you said," he said after a moment. "About being too broken to be mended, and I want you to know something, Sarah. You are not broken. You are hurt, yes, you are grieving, and that is natural and right, but hurt does not mean broken. It just means you loved deeply, and that is something to be proud of, not ashamed of." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" "I do not," Caleb said with a rueful smile. "Half the time I am just hoping I do not make things worse, but I mean it, Sarah. You are one of the strongest, bravest women I have ever met, and I feel privileged to know you." Sarah turned to look at him, really look at him, and she saw the sincerity in his eyes, the warmth and admiration that he made no effort to hide. And she realized with a shock that went through her like lightning that she was attracted to him. Not just physically, though there was certainly that, but emotionally, mentally, in all the ways that mattered. She was drawn to his kindness and his strength, his patience and his humor, his ability to see past her walls to the woman beneath, and that terrified her. "Caleb," she said slowly, her voice shaking, "I need you to understand something. I am not ready for anything more than friendship. I do not know if I will ever be ready." My heart still belongs to James, and I do not know if I can ever give it to someone else." Caleb was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah braced herself for disappointment or anger. But when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "I understand, and I am not asking you to give me your heart, Sarah. I am just asking to be your friend. If someday that changes, if someday you find that you have room in your heart for more, then we will talk about it then. But until that day, I am content to be whatever you need me to be." Sarah felt something loosen in her chest, something that had been wound tight for so long. "You are a good man, Caleb Stone." "I try," Caleb said with a smile. "Now come on, let us get back before Martha sends out a search party." They walked back to the gathering hand in hand, and Sarah felt lighter than she had in months. The evening passed in a blur of conversation and laughter, and by the time Caleb drove her home, Sarah was exhausted but happy. "Thank you for today," she said as they pulled up in front of the general store. "It was exactly what I needed." "Any time," Caleb said. "I mean that, Sarah. Any time you need a friend, I am here." Sarah climbed down from the wagon and stood for a moment, looking up at him in the moonlight. On impulse, she reached up and squeezed his hand. "Good night, Caleb." "Good night, Sarah," he said softly, and she could feel his eyes on her as she climbed the stairs to her room. That night, for the first time since James died, Sarah dreamed of something other than gunshots and blood. She dreamed of sunshine and laughter, of music and dancing, of a pair of warm brown eyes that looked at her like she was something precious. And when she woke the next morning, she did not feel the usual crushing weight of despair. Instead, she felt something that might have been hope. Over the following weeks, Sarah and Caleb fell into an easy rhythm. He continued to visit the saloon most evenings, and they would talk for hours about everything and nothing. Sarah found herself opening up to him in ways she had not opened up to anyone since James died, telling him about her childhood in Missouri, about meeting James at a church social, about their simple, happy life together. And Caleb shared his own stories, about growing up on a small ranch in Colorado, about the adventures he had had drifting from job to job, about his dreams of someday owning his own spread. Sarah also found herself growing more involved in the community. She helped Martha organize a charity drive for the local school, contributed baked goods to the church social, and even attended a few of the town's social gatherings. People seemed surprised but pleased by her increased participation, and Sarah realized that she had been so focused on her own pain that she had not noticed the warmth and kindness that surrounded her. One hot afternoon in July, Sarah was working in the general store when a commotion outside drew her attention. She looked out the window to see a group of men on horseback riding hard down the main street, their faces grim. Something about the way they moved sent a chill down her spine. "Mr. Chen came to stand beside her, his expression worried. "That is Tom Collins and his men. Something must have happened at the ranch." Sarah's heart clenched with sudden fear. Caleb was at the ranch. She threw off her apron and ran outside, not even stopping to think about what she was doing. She caught Tom as he dismounted in front of the sheriff's office. "What happened?" she demanded, grabbing his arm. "Is Caleb all right?" Tom looked at her with tired, worried eyes. "There was trouble with rustlers. They hit us last night, ran off about 20 head of cattle. Caleb tracked them this morning and there was a fight. He took a bullet to the shoulder, but he is alive. Doc Morrison is with him now at the ranch." Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She clutched Tom's arm harder, trying to steady herself. "How bad is it?" "Doc says he will be fine," Tom assured her. "The bullet went clean through, no major damage, but he lost some blood and needs to rest for a few weeks." Sarah barely heard the rest of what Tom said. All she could think about was Caleb hurt, bleeding, possibly dying. The panic that rose in her chest was familiar but also different, sharper and more immediate than the grief she had carried for James. This was fear for someone who was still alive, someone who could still be saved, and it galvanized her into action. "I need to see him," she said, her voice brooking no argument. "Can you take me to the ranch?" Tom looked surprised but nodded. "I am heading back there now. You can ride with me." Sarah ran back into the store long enough to tell Mr. Chen she was leaving, then climbed onto Tom's horse behind him. The ride to the ranch felt like it took forever, every minute an agony of worry and fear. When they finally arrived, Sarah jumped down before the horse had fully stopped and ran toward the main house. Martha met her at the door, her face lined with concern. "He is upstairs, first room on the right. Doc Morrison just finished patching him up." Sarah took the stairs 2 at a time, her heart pounding. She burst into the room to find Caleb lying in a narrow bed, his chest bare except for the thick bandage wrapped around his left shoulder. His face was pale, his eyes closed, and Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. Doc Morrison looked up from packing his medical bag. "He is sleeping," he said quietly. "I gave him something for the pain. The wound is clean, and if infection does not set in, he should make a full recovery. But he needs rest and quiet." Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, her eyes never leaving Caleb's face. Doc Morrison said something else, but Sarah did not hear him, too focused on the slow rise and fall of Caleb's chest, the reassuring proof that he was alive. She sat there for hours as the light outside faded and night fell. Martha brought her food that she did not eat and a blanket that she did not use. She could not take her eyes off Caleb, could not stop the litany of prayers running through her mind. "Please let him be all right. Please do not take him from me. Please, please, please." It was near midnight when Caleb's eyes finally opened. He blinked slowly, disoriented, then his gaze found Sarah and a weak smile crossed his face. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "What are you doing here?" "You got shot, you idiot," Sarah said, her voice breaking despite her best efforts to stay calm. "Where else would I be? You should be sleeping," Caleb said, "in your own bed, not sitting here watching over me." "Well, I am here, so you will just have to deal with it," Sarah said fiercely. She took his hand, gripping it tightly. "You scared me, Caleb. When Tom said you had been shot, I thought I am too broken for any man," I whispered low, but the cowboy said, "Lucky I specialize in mending." Her voice caught. "I thought I was going to lose you before I even had a chance to figure out what you mean to me." Caleb's eyes widened, and despite his obvious pain, his smile grew. "Sarah, are you saying what I think you are saying?" Sarah took a shaky breath, tears streaming down her face. "I do not know what I am saying. I just know that the thought of you dying made me realize that I cannot keep hiding behind my grief. I cannot keep pretending that I do not feel anything when the truth is that I am terrified because I am starting to care about you, Caleb. I am starting to care about you so much, and it scares me to death because I already know what it feels like to lose someone I love, and I do not know if I can survive that again." Caleb squeezed her hand with what little strength he had. "Hey," he said softly, "look at me, Sarah. I am not going anywhere. I am right here and I am going to be fine. Doc Morrison said so himself." "But what about next time?" Sarah said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "What about the next rustler or the next accident or the next random act of violence? How am I supposed to open my heart to you when I know that at any moment you could be taken away from me? You cannot live your life in fear of what might happen," Caleb said, his voice gentle but firm. "Yes, something could happen to me, or to you, or to anyone we care about. That is the nature of life, Sarah. It is fragile and uncertain and sometimes terrifyingly short. But that does not mean we stop living. It does not mean we stop loving. If anything, it means we should love harder, deeper, more fiercely, because we never know how much time we have." Sarah stared at him, her vision blurred with tears. "I do not know if I am strong enough for that." "You are," Caleb said with absolute certainty. "You are the strongest person I know, Sarah McKenzie. You survived the worst thing that could happen to you, and you are still here, still fighting, still capable of caring about others. That is not weakness. That is incredible, awe-inspiring strength." Sarah let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "How do you always know exactly what I need to hear?" "Lucky guess," Caleb said with a tired smile. "Now come here." Sarah leaned forward, and Caleb reached up with his good arm to cup her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "I am not asking you to forget James," he said softly. "I am not asking you to stop loving him or to pretend that part of your life did not happen. I am just asking you to make room in your heart for something new. For me, if you are willing. I know I am not perfect, and I know I cannot promise that nothing will ever happen to me. But I can promise that for however long I have, I will love you with everything I am. I will be patient with your grief and gentle with your fears. I will stand beside you through the hard days and celebrate with you through the good ones. I will be your partner, your friend, your love, for as long as you will have me." Sarah felt something crack open inside her, something that had been locked tight since James died. It was not that her love for James disappeared or diminished. That would always be a part of her, a precious memory she would carry forever. But she realized that her heart was not a finite thing that could only love once. It was vast and resilient and capable of holding both her past and her future, her grief and her hope, her sorrow and her joy. "I am too broken for any man," she whispered, echoing words she had said before, but this time they felt different, less like a statement of fact and more like a question, a plea for reassurance. Caleb smiled, his eyes warm and full of love. "Lucky I specialize in mending." And then Sarah was leaning down, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was soft and tentative and full of promise. It was nothing like kissing James had been. That had been comfortable and familiar, the easy affection of long companionship. This was new and uncertain and a little bit scary, but it was also exciting and alive and full of possibility. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Caleb was grinning despite the obvious pain in his shoulder. "I should get shot more often if this is the result." Sarah swatted his good arm lightly. "Do not even joke about that, I just got you, I am not losing you anytime soon." "Yes, ma'am," Caleb said, his eyes sparkling. "I will do my best to stay alive and well for you." Sarah settled back in her chair, still holding Caleb's hand, and felt peace wash over her for the first time in months. She was not healed, not completely. The scars from James's death would always be with her, tender spots that would ache on anniversaries and in quiet moments. But she was healing, slowly and imperfectly, and with Caleb beside her, she thought maybe, just maybe, she could learn to be whole again. Caleb's recovery took several weeks, during which Sarah became a constant presence at the Collins Ranch. She helped Martha with the cooking and cleaning, changed Caleb's bandages under Doc Morrison's supervision, and kept him company during the long, boring hours when he was confined to bed. They talked about everything, learning each other's quirks and habits, their hopes and fears, their dreams for the future. Sarah told him about the guilt she carried, the irrational but persistent belief that she should have been able to save James somehow. Caleb listened without judgment, then gently pointed out that she had been just as helpless as anyone else in that moment, that there was no way she could have stopped a bullet or predicted a random act of violence. It was hard for Sarah to let go of that guilt, but with Caleb's patient support, she began to forgive herself for being human. Caleb told her about his own struggles after his brother's death, about the drinking he had done to numb the pain, the fights he had gotten into, the way he had pushed away everyone who tried to help him. He had eventually pulled himself out of that dark place, but it had taken years and a lot of hard work. His honesty made Sarah feel less alone in her grief, less like a failure for not being able to simply move on. As Caleb grew stronger, they began taking short walks around the ranch, his arm linked with hers for support. The Texas summer was in full swing, the heat oppressive but the evenings beautiful, the sky painted in shades of gold and pink as the sun set. They would sit on the porch of the bunkhouse, watching the stars come out and talk until the moon was high overhead. One evening in early August, as they sat together watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk, Caleb turned to Sarah with a serious expression. "I have been thinking," he said, "about the future, about what I want my life to look like. And I realized that what I want more than anything is to build something permanent, something that will last. I have been drifting for years, moving from job to job, never staying in one place long enough to put down roots. But I am tired of drifting, Sarah. I want to settle down, build a life, maybe even start a family someday. Sarah's heart beat faster. What are you saying, Caleb? I am saying that I want you to be part of that future, Caleb said, taking her hand. I know it is soon, and I know you are still healing. But I also know that what I feel for you is real and lasting. I love you, Sarah McKenzie. I love your strength and your compassion, your stubbornness and your vulnerability. I love the way you laugh when you forget to guard yourself, and the way you look at the world with such fierce protectiveness. I love every part of you, the broken pieces and the healed ones, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you just how much. Sarah felt tears spill down her cheeks, but for once they were not tears of grief. I love you too, she whispered, the words feeling strange and wonderful on her tongue. I did not think I would ever be able to say those words again, but I do. I love you, Caleb. Caleb pulled her close, careful of his healing shoulder, and kissed her with a passion that made Sarah's toes curl. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said simply. Not today, not next week, but someday when you are ready. Marry me and let me spend the rest of my life mending your broken pieces while you mend mine. Sarah laughed through her tears. That is the worst proposal I have ever heard. Give me time to come up with something better, Caleb said with a grin. I am still recovering from a gunshot wound. My romantic skills are a bit rusty. Yes, Sarah said, cutting off his rambling. Yes, I will marry you. Someday when I am ready, I will marry you and build a life with you and let you love me the way I am starting to love you. Caleb let out a whoop of joy that echoed across the ranch, causing several of the horses in the nearby corral to snort in surprise. He picked Sarah up and spun her around, ignoring her protests about his shoulder, then kissed her again with such enthusiasm that they both ended up laughing. The news of their engagement, unofficial though it was, spread through the community like wildfire. Martha was thrilled, already planning a wedding that Sarah insisted was months away. The ranch hands teased Caleb mercilessly, but their congratulations were genuine. Even Isaac Freeman stopped by the ranch to offer his well wishes, grinning from ear to ear. I knew you two would end up together, he said to Sarah. Anyone with eyes could see how he looked at you. Sarah blushed but did not deny it. She was still getting used to the idea of being part of a couple again, of having someone to share her life with. But with each passing day, it felt more natural, more right. As summer turned to fall, Caleb returned to his duties as foreman, and Sarah continued her work at the saloon and general store. But their free time was spent together, either at the ranch or in town, building the foundation of their relationship. They went on picnics by the creek, attended church socials together, and spent long evenings talking about their plans for the future. Caleb had been saving money for years with the dream of buying his own land, and he showed Sarah the plot he had been eyeing, about 30 miles south of Red Creek. It was beautiful country, with good grazing land and a natural spring that would provide water year-round. Sarah could picture it easily, a small ranch house with a porch where they could sit and watch the sunset, a barn for horses and cattle, maybe a garden where she could grow vegetables and flowers. We could build something real here, Caleb said, his arm around her shoulders as they surveyed the land. Something that would last for generations. Our children could grow up here, learn to ride and rope, to work the land and respect it. We could build a legacy, Sarah. Sarah leaned into him, letting herself dream for the first time since James died. Children, she said softly. I never thought I would have children. James and I tried for 3 years, but it never happened. I had started to think maybe I could not. Or maybe it just was not the right time, Caleb said gently. Either way, children or no children, I want to build a life with you. That is what matters to me. Sarah turned to kiss him, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. She had been so certain that her life was over when James died, that she would spend the rest of her days as a hollow shell going through the motions. But Caleb had shown her that there was still joy to be found, still love to be given and received, still a future worth fighting for. In October, Caleb approached Sarah with a proposition. "Tom is willing to sell me a portion of his land," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. "It is not the plot we looked at, but it is good land, and it is close enough that we would still be part of the community here. With what I have saved and what Tom is asking, I can afford it and still have enough left over to build a small house and buy some starter cattle. What do you think?" Sarah thought about it carefully. The land near Red Creek meant staying close to Martha and the friends she had made, to the life she was building. It also meant not having to start completely over in a new place. "I think it sounds perfect," she said. "When can we start building?" They were married on a crisp November morning, with the whole community gathered to celebrate. Sarah wore a simple dress of blue calico that Martha had helped her make, and Caleb wore his best suit, his dark hair slicked back and his face clean-shaven. Martha stood up with Sarah, and Tom stood up with Caleb, and the local minister performed the ceremony in the small church at the edge of town. When Caleb slipped the ring on Sarah's finger, a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother, Sarah felt a surge of emotion so powerful it took her breath away. This was not the same as marrying James had been. That had been the hopeful beginning of a young couple just starting out in life. This was something deeper and more complex, built on loss and survival, on the hard-won understanding that life was precious and fragile and should be lived fully. "I love you," she whispered as Caleb leaned in to kiss her. "I love you too," he whispered back. "My beautiful, strong, incredible wife." The reception was held at the Silver Star, with food and music and dancing that went on late into the night. Sarah did dance this time, whirling in Caleb's arms to the lively fiddle music, laughing with pure joy. She felt James's presence there too, not as a weight or a source of pain, but as a gentle blessing, a reminder that love did not end with death but continued on in the hearts of those left behind. As the evening wound down and guests began to drift away, Caleb led Sarah outside to the wagon he had decorated with ribbons and wildflowers. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Stone?" Sarah smiled at the sound of her new name. She would always be Sarah McKenzie in her heart, the woman who had loved and lost James. But she was also Sarah Stone now, the woman who had survived grief and found love again. Both identities were part of her, both precious and true. "Yes," she said, climbing into the wagon beside him. "Let us go home." Their home was still mostly just a shell, the frame of a house that Caleb and Tom and several of the ranch hands had built over the past month. But there was a roof overhead and walls to keep out the wind, and a simple bed in the corner that Martha had furnished with quilts and pillows. It was not much, but it was theirs, the beginning of the life they would build together. That night, as they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Sarah traced the scar on Caleb's shoulder, the reminder of how close she had come to losing him. "I am glad you specialized in mending," she said softly. "I do not think I could have done this without you." "You are stronger than you think," Caleb said, kissing the top of her head, "but I am glad I could help, and I am glad you let me." Sarah thought about how far she had come in the past months, from the broken, despairing woman who had stood behind the bar of the Silver Star to this new version of herself, healed enough to love again. She was not the same person she had been before James died. That Sarah was gone, lost in the moment the gunshot rang out. But this Sarah, scarred and tempered by grief, was someone she was learning to be proud of. "Do you ever think about your brother?" she asked. "About Daniel, all the time," Caleb admitted. "Especially at moments like this when I am happy. I wish he could have met you, could have seen me settled and content. I think he would have liked you." "I wish I could have met him too," Sarah said. "And I wish James could have met you. I think you two would have gotten along." They lay in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in memories of those they had lost. But the memories were gentle now, bittersweet rather than agonizing, a reminder of love that endured even beyond death. "We should name our first child after them," Sarah said suddenly. "If it is a boy, Daniel James, if it is a girl, we will figure something out." Caleb tightened his arms around her. "I love that idea, and I love you." "I love you too," Sarah said, and the words came easier each time she said them. The winter of 1878 was mild by Texas standards, with only a few hard freezes and occasional rain. Caleb and Sarah spent those months finishing their house, working side by side to make it into a real home. They built furniture from rough-cut lumber, Caleb teaching Sarah the carpentry skills he had learned from watching James, and Sarah in turn teaching Caleb her mother's recipes as they cooked simple meals on the cast-iron stove Caleb had hauled from town. Sarah discovered that she loved ranch life, loved the physical work of caring for animals and tending to the land. She learned to ride horses with confidence, to rope and brand cattle, to mend fences and fix equipment. Caleb was a patient teacher, never making her feel foolish when she made mistakes, always encouraging her to try again. They also became pillars of the Red Creek community. Caleb served as foreman for several of the local ranches when they needed extra help during busy seasons, and Sarah continued to work at the saloon and general store a few days a week, using the extra money to build up their savings. They attended church every Sunday, hosted dinners for their friends, and participated in community events. Isaac Freeman became a frequent visitor to their ranch, helping with chores in exchange for riding lessons. He was growing into a fine young man, and Sarah and Caleb both took pride in watching him develop his skills with horses. Isaac's grandmother would often send food with him, delicious meals that reminded Sarah of the kindness that had first brought her and Caleb together. In the spring of 1879, Sarah realized that she had not had her monthly courses in several weeks. At first, she tried not to get her hopes up, remembering the years of disappointment with James. But as the weeks turned into months and her body began to change in unmistakable ways, she finally allowed herself to believe. She told Caleb one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "I am with child," she said simply, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat belly. Caleb's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, and then pure, radiant joy. He let out a whoop and picked Sarah up, spinning her around just as he had the night they got engaged. "We are going to have a baby," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Sarah, we are going to be parents." "I know," Sarah said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I am terrified and excited and overwhelmed all at once." "We can do this," Caleb said, setting her down gently and cupping her face in his hands. "We can do anything together." The pregnancy was not easy. Sarah suffered from terrible nausea in the early months and ached constantly in the later ones. But Caleb was attentive and supportive, taking over the heavier chores and making sure Sarah rested as much as possible. Martha was thrilled at the prospect of being an honorary grandmother, already knitting booties and blankets in preparation. On a cold December morning, as 1879 drew to a close, Sarah went into labor. It was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours, and there were moments when Sarah was sure she could not do it, sure that the pain would break her. But Caleb was there the whole time, holding her hand and wiping her brow and whispering words of encouragement. And Martha was there too, her capable hands guiding Sarah through each contraction. Finally, as dawn broke on a new day, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. He came into the world squalling and red-faced, his tiny fists waving in indignation, and Sarah fell in love instantly and completely. "Daniel James Stone," she whispered, cradling him against her chest while tears of joy streamed down her face. "Welcome to the world, little one." Caleb leaned over them both, his own eyes wet, and pressed a kiss to Sarah's temple. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I am the luckiest man in the world." Motherhood transformed Sarah in ways she had not anticipated. She had always thought of herself as broken, as fundamentally damaged by the loss of James. But holding her son, watching him grow and thrive, she realized that she was not broken at all. She was healed, not in the sense of being unchanged by her grief, but in the sense of having integrated that grief into who she was and moved forward. She still thought about James, especially on anniversaries and birthdays, and there were still moments when the old pain would flare up unexpectedly. But those moments were fewer and farther between, and when they came, she had Caleb and Daniel to anchor her, to remind her that life went on, and that love was possible even after loss. Daniel was a happy, healthy baby who grew quickly, his dark hair and brown eyes marking him as unmistakably Caleb's son. But he had Sarah's determination and stubborn streak, traits that became apparent as soon as he learned to crawl. He was into everything, exploring every corner of their home and yard with fearless enthusiasm. When Daniel was 6 months old, Sarah realized she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect. In the summer of 1881, she gave birth to a daughter they named Clara Rose, after both their mothers. Clara was quieter than Daniel had been, a sweet-tempered baby who seemed content to observe the world with wide, curious eyes. Their little family was complete, or so Sarah thought. But in 1883, she found herself pregnant once more, and this time she gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Matthew and Emma. The twins were a handful, two active toddlers who seemed determined to get into as much mischief as possible. But Sarah and Caleb managed, relying on each other and the support of their community. Over the years, their ranch grew and prospered. Caleb proved to be a skilled rancher, and their herd of cattle increased steadily. They built a larger house to accommodate their growing family, with 4 bedrooms and a spacious kitchen where Sarah could cook the large meals needed to feed hungry children. They added a barn and a chicken coop, a vegetable garden and an orchard of fruit trees. Isaac Freeman eventually married a lovely young woman named Ruth, and they built their own small ranch not far from Sarah and Caleb's. Isaac became one of Caleb's most trusted partners, and their children grew up playing together, building friendships that would last a lifetime. Sarah continued to think about James, but the memories no longer brought the sharp, stabbing pain they once had. Instead, they were gentle, sweet recollections of a love that had been real and precious. She told her children about him sometimes, about the kind man who had first taught their mother that broken things could be mended. And she made sure they understood that it was possible to love more than one person in a lifetime, that the heart was vast enough to hold both past and present. Caleb never seemed jealous of James's memory. Instead, he honored it, understanding that Sarah's past was part of what made her who she was. On the anniversary of James's death each year, he would hold Sarah while she cried, offering silent support and love. And Sarah loved him all the more for his generosity of spirit, for his willingness to share her heart with a ghost. As the years passed and their children grew, Sarah and Caleb's love deepened and matured. They had their share of struggles, of course. There were lean years when the cattle prices dropped, and they had to scrape by on very little. There were illnesses and injuries, moments of fear and worry. There were arguments and misunderstandings, times when they went to bed angry and woke up still upset. But through it all, they had each other. And that, Sarah realized, was what mending really meant. It was not about erasing the scars or pretending the breaks had never happened. It was about acknowledging the damage, honoring it, and then choosing to move forward anyway. It was about building something new from the broken pieces, something stronger and more beautiful for having been tested. On their 20th wedding anniversary, in the fall of 1898, Sarah and Caleb renewed their vows in front of their children and grandchildren. Daniel was married now with 2 children of his own, and Clara was engaged to a young rancher from a neighboring spread. The twins were in their teens, already showing signs of the capable adults they would become. As Sarah stood beside Caleb, holding his hand and looking into his eyes, she felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it made her breath catch. She thought about the broken woman she had been when they first met, the woman who had whispered, "I am too broken for any man." And she thought about Caleb's response, spoken with such confidence and love. "Lucky I specialize in mending." He had mended her, yes, but she had mended him too. They had mended each other, filling in the cracks and gaps with love and patience and grace. They had built a life together, a family, a legacy that would outlive them both. And it had all started with a choice, a decision to stop running from the pain and start facing it, to risk opening her heart one more time even when she was sure it would break. "I love you," she whispered as the minister pronounced them husband and wife all over again. "I love you too," Caleb whispered back. "My beautiful, strong, incredible wife, thank you for letting me mend you." "Thank you for being patient enough to do it," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. They kissed to the cheers and applause of their family, and Sarah felt a sense of completion, of rightness, that she had not felt since before James died. She was not the same woman she had been then, and she never would be. But she was whole in a different way, healed by time and love, and the steady, patient care of a man who had seen her broken pieces and loved her anyway. As the party continued into the evening, with music and dancing and laughter filling the night air, Sarah found a quiet moment alone with Caleb. They stood on the porch of their home, watching their children and grandchildren celebrate, and Sarah leaned against Caleb's solid warmth. "You ever regret it?" she asked softly. Taking on a broken woman with so much baggage, Caleb turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Not for a single second. You were never broken, Sarah. You were hurt and grieving and scared, but you were never broken. And even if you had been, I would still have chosen you. I would choose you 1,000 times over in this life and the next." Sarah felt her heart swell with love. "How did I get so lucky?" "I am the lucky one," Caleb said, pulling her close. "You made me a better man, Sarah. You taught me that love is not about perfection or easy happiness. It is about showing up every day, even when it is hard, and choosing each other over and over again. You taught me what it means to be truly brave." They stood there in the darkness, holding each other while the party continued inside, and Sarah thought about all the years that had passed since that first day in the Silver Star Saloon. She thought about the journey she had taken from brokenness to wholeness, from despair to joy, from isolation to belonging. It had not been an easy journey, and there had been many times when she wanted to give up. But she had not given up, and neither had Caleb. Together, they had built something extraordinary from the ashes of their individual losses. They had created a family, a home, a life full of love and meaning. They had proved that it was possible to survive the worst and still find happiness on the other side. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb asked, his voice warm in her ear. "Everything," Sarah said, smiling. "Our life together, how far we have come, how grateful I am for every moment." "Me too," Caleb said. "Me too." As they stood there together under the star-filled Texas sky, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. She had been broken once, shattered into what seemed like irreparable pieces. But Caleb had been right when he said he specialized in mending. He had taken those broken pieces and gently, patiently, lovingly put them back together, not into their original shape, but into something new and beautiful. And Sarah had done the same for him, mending his old wounds and helping him build the permanent, lasting life he had always dreamed of. They had mended each other, and in doing so, they had created something far greater than either of them could have achieved alone. The years that followed were good ones, full of the ordinary joys and sorrows that make up a well-lived life. Sarah and Caleb grew old together, their faces lined with age but their love as strong as ever. They watched their children build their own families, watched their grandchildren grow and have children of their own. They worked the ranch as long as they were able, then gradually handed over the reins to Daniel and his sons, content to spend their days sitting on the porch and watching the world go by. On a warm spring morning in 1910, Sarah woke to find Caleb already up, sitting in his favorite chair on the porch with a cup of coffee. She poured her own cup and joined him, settling into the chair beside his with a contented sigh. Beautiful morning, Caleb said, reaching over to take her hand. They all are, Sarah said, squeezing his fingers. Every morning I wake up beside you is beautiful. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun rise over the land they had built together. Sarah thought about the young woman she had been, so convinced that her life was over, that she would never be whole again. And she thought about how wrong she had been, how much joy and love she would have missed if she had not taken the risk of opening her heart to Caleb. "Do you remember," she said softly, "that night in the back room of the saloon when I told you I was too broken for any man?" Caleb chuckled. "I remember. And I remember telling you that lucky I specialized in mending, best decision I ever made." "Mine too," Sarah said. "Letting you mend me and letting myself love you, it saved my life, Caleb. You saved my life." "We saved each other," Caleb corrected gently. "That is what love does, Sarah. It saves us from our own despair, our own fear, our own isolation. It reminds us that we are not alone, that we are valued and cherished and needed." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. "I love you, Caleb Stone. Thank you for being patient with me, for waiting until I was ready, for loving me even when I could not love myself." "Always," Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion. "From the first moment I saw you behind that bar, looking so fierce and wounded, I knew you were special. I knew I wanted to know you, to help you if you would let me. And you did let me, eventually, and it has been the greatest privilege of my life." They spent the rest of the morning on the porch, talking and laughing and remembering. Their life had not been perfect, but it had been theirs, built on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding, of patience and love and the willingness to be vulnerable with each other. As the sun climbed higher and the day grew warmer, their family began to arrive. Daniel and his wife brought their grandchildren. Clara came with her husband and grown children, and the twins arrived with their respective families. The house filled with noise and laughter, with the chaos of a large, loving family gathered together. Sarah watched it all with a full heart, marveling at the legacy she and Caleb had created. All of this, she thought, all of these people and this love and this joy, it all started because one broken woman took a chance on a patient cowboy who said he specialized in mending. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner around the long table Caleb had built with his own hands, Daniel stood to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us all what real love looks like. Who showed us that broken does not mean ruined, that grief does not mean the end, that it is never too late to start over and build something beautiful. Mom, Dad, thank you for everything you have given us, for the example you set, for the love you showed not just to each other but to everyone around you. We love you." "Hear, hear," the rest of the family chorused, raising their glasses. Sarah looked at Caleb, saw the pride and love shining in his eyes, and felt her own eyes fill with tears. This was what mending looked like. Not a perfect restoration of what had been lost, but a transformation into something new and different and equally precious. She had been broken, yes, but that brokenness had led her here, to this moment, to this family, to this life that exceeded her wildest dreams. As the evening drew to a close and their family began to drift away, Sarah and Caleb returned to their porch, to their chairs, to the comfortable silence they had perfected over decades together. "We did good," Caleb said softly. "We did," Sarah agreed. "We did very good." They sat there under the stars, two old people who had loved and lost and loved again, who had taken their broken pieces and made something beautiful. And Sarah knew, with a certainty that went bone deep, that this was the happy ending she had once thought impossible. Not an ending without pain or loss, but an ending filled with love and family and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. She thought of James sometimes still, with fondness and gratitude for the love he had given her. And she knew that somehow, somewhere, he was happy for her, glad that she had found someone to walk beside her through the rest of her days. Love did not end, she had learned. It transformed, evolved, made room for new love without diminishing the old. "What are you smiling about?" Caleb asked, though his own lips curved up in an answering smile. Just thinking about how lucky I am, Sarah said. How lucky we both are. Lucky, Caleb repeated, pulling her hand to his lips for a gentle kiss. Yes, I suppose we are, though I prefer to think of it as blessed. Blessed to have found each other, blessed to have built this life together, blessed to have loved and been loved so well. Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder, content in a way she had once thought impossible. The night was warm and peaceful, filled with the sounds of crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. It was a good night, one of thousands they had shared, and Sarah treasured it as she treasured all the nights that had come before and all the nights yet to come. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, Caleb whispered back. My beautiful, strong, incredible wife, forever and always. And there, on the porch of the home they had built together, surrounded by the land they had worked and the legacy they had created, Sarah and Caleb sat in perfect harmony. Two souls who had been broken and had mended each other, who had chosen love over fear, hope over despair, connection over isolation. It was the happy ending Sarah had never dared dream of, and it was all the sweeter for having been hard-won. She was not the same woman who had whispered, I am too broken for any man, all those years ago. That woman had been transformed, not by forgetting her pain but by integrating it, by allowing herself to be loved despite it, by trusting that broken things could indeed be mended. And Caleb, true to his word, had specialized in that mending. Not by fixing her, but by standing beside her, by being patient and kind and steadfast, by loving her through the hard days and celebrating with her through the good ones. Together, they had proved that love was possible after loss, that happiness could be found again, that broken did not mean beyond repair. As the stars wheeled overhead and the night deepened around them, Sarah sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the life she had been given, for the second chance she had almost refused, for the courage to love again when it would have been so much easier to hide. And she thanked James, too, for teaching her what love was in the first place, for showing her that her heart was capable of such depth of feeling. The years ahead would bring their share of challenges. Eventually, age would take its toll and one of them would leave before the other. But that was far in the future, and Sarah refused to worry about it now. Instead, she focused on the present moment, on the warmth of Caleb's hand in hers, on the steady rhythm of his breathing, on the profound contentment that filled her from head to toe. This was what it meant to be healed. Not to forget the past or to pretend the pain had never happened, but to carry it forward with grace, to let it inform but not define her, to honor both who she had been and who she had become. Sarah was proud of the woman she had become, proud of the life she had built, proud of the love she had given and received. And as she drifted off to sleep that night, curled up beside Caleb in the bed they had shared for over 30 years, Sarah smiled. She had been too broken for any man, she had whispered low. And the cowboy had said lucky he specialized in mending. It had turned out to be the truest, most important words ever spoken between them, the foundation on which their entire life together had been built. Lucky indeed, Sarah thought as sleep claimed her. Lucky to have been broken and lucky to have been mended. Lucky to have loved and lost and loved again. Lucky to have found her cowboy, her partner, her heart's home. And lucky, most of all, to have had the courage to say yes when every part of her wanted to say no. It was a good life, a blessed life, a life full of meaning and purpose and love. And it had all started with mending, with the patient, gentle process of putting broken pieces back together. Not into their original shape, but into something new and beautiful and infinitely precious. That was the true miracle, Sarah thought drowsily. Not that broken things could be mended, but that in the mending they could become even more beautiful than they had been before. And with that thought warming her heart, Sarah Stone, formerly McKenzie, once broken but now whole, drifted into peaceful, contented sleep in the arms of the man who had taught her that mending was possible, that love was possible, that life was possible even after the worst had happened. The woman who had been too broken for any man had found her home, her healing, her happiness with the cowboy who specialized in mending. and they lived the rest of their days in love and peace and joy, a testament to the power of patience, kindness, and the unwavering belief that broken things could always be made whole again.